The Pirate King, Episode 5, Curiosity. Sam Jensen understood rules. That was part of what made him good at his job. Not just following them, but knowing why they existed, where they mattered, and where they didn't. Most of the time, the line was clear. You stayed in your lane, did the work assigned to you, and let the rest go. That was how things moved. It was how cases stayed organized and how people didn't step on each other and turn something simple into a problem. It wasn't about control. It was about structure, about keeping things from unraveling, because someone decided they knew better than the system already in place. Most of the time that worked. Most of the time that was enough. It wasn't just routine either. It was something he trusted. Something that had proven itself over and over again. And even when things didn't make sense right away, they eventually did. Because the system had a way of pulling things back into place whether people realized it or not. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was. But it was consistent, and consistency was something you could rely on when everything else started to blur. You counted on it when details overlapped and situations didn't resolve cleanly. It gave things a boundary, something to work within, something that kept you from drifting too far into something you weren't supposed to be in. The Pirate King wasn't one of those times. It showed up again that following week, not in a case assigned to him, not in anything he was supposed to be working on, but in the edges. It appeared in the kind of places most people didn't spend time looking because they didn't need to, because the system didn't require it, and the job didn't reward it. Mentions buried in reports, references that didn't go anywhere, fragments of activity seemed disconnected until you looked at them long enough for patterns to start forming. Even those patterns didn't hold the way they should have. They shifted just enough to stay unclear, just enough to keep themselves from becoming something solid. It wasn't just that it existed, it was the way it existed. The way it refused to settle into something identifiable. It was something that couldn't be tracked and followed through to a conclusion. Every time he thought he was starting to see something, it adjusted. Subtle, but deliberate. Like it was aware of the attention and responding in real time. Not aggressively, not defensively, just enough to stay out of reach. That wasn't normal. Even systems designed to hide didn't behave like that without leaving something behind. There was always a scene, always a delay or some kind of residue from the people behind it. Because no matter how advanced something was, there was always a human element somewhere in the process. That was where things broke down, where patterns stopped being perfect and started being real. But the Pirate King didn't do that. Or if it did, it buried those imperfections so well that they never surfaced long enough to be caught, never stayed in one place long enough to be measured. He told himself to leave it alone more than once. It wasn't his case, and there were people above him who would already be aware of something like this if it mattered. That was how it worked. You didn't chase everything just because you noticed it. You trusted the structure. You trusted that the right people were handling the right things. That was the system he believed in. The one he had built his career on. The one that had never really failed him in a way that mattered. But the more he saw it, the harder that became. Not because it demanded attention, but because it refused to resolve without it. It didn't behave like a case that was actively being worked. It behaved like something that was being deliberately avoided, something that existed just outside of reach on purpose, and that sat wrong with him in a way he couldn't ignore. Avoidance usually had gaps. It had consistencies, rough edges where people trying not to look at something ended up revealing it anyway. This didn't feel like that. This felt steady, controlled, and maintained. Like someone wasn't just hiding it, they were managing how it appeared, directing how it moved, how much of it could be seen at any given time. And to Sam, that meant intention. Not just concealment, but design. He leaned back in his chair slightly, eyes still on the screen as the room around him slowly emptied. One by one, people finished up. Conversations faded, chairs sliding back into place, lights dimming in sections as the building shifted into its after-hours rhythm. It was quieter now, the kind of quiet that didn't feel empty but focused, like everything that had remained mattered more because everything else was gone. He had always liked that part of the job, the time when distractions dropped away and what was left was just the work itself, the part that didn't need to be shared or explained. He wasn't assigned to the Pirate King. That fact stayed in the back of his mind even as his hands kept moving, pulling up archived references, cross-checking names, aligning timestamps in ways no one had asked him to. It wasn't reckless, not in the way it might have looked from the outside. It was controlled curiosity, intentional, the same way he approached everything else. He wasn't diving in blind, he was observing, building context, understanding the edges before ever stepping into the center. That distinction mattered to him, even if it didn't actually change what he was doing. But even that felt like stepping further than he should. He opened another report, letting it sit beside the others as his eyes moved across the details, slower now, more deliberate. Patterns didn't show themselves when you rushed them. They appeared when you let them, when you stopped looking for something specific and started noticing what stayed consistent instead. And that was where they lived, in repetition, in the things that didn't change when everything else did. Same access points, same timing windows, same kind of activity that appeared just long enough to register before disappearing again. It wasn't messy, it wasn't careless, it was controlled. He shifted slightly, pulling up a second set of logs to align with the first, watching how they interacted, where they overlapped, where they avoided each other. It didn't spike and it didn't stack. It flowed, spreading itself out in a way that avoided attention, while still maintaining presence. And that took effort. That took design, not something that happened by accident. The longer he looked at it, the more it felt like he wasn't uncovering something. It felt like he was only being allowed to see pieces of it. That thought stayed with him longer than he expected. He leaned forward again, resting his forearms on the desk as his eyes narrowed slightly, not out of frustration, but focus. If this was being managed, then the only way to see it clearly wasn't to chase it directly, but to map everything around it, to let the surrounding data define its shape instead of trying to define it himself. That meant widening the scope, not narrowing it. It meant stepping back far enough that the pieces started connecting whether they were meant to or not. It was slower that way, but it worked, and he trusted that. The pattern didn't disappear when he approached it like that. It sharpened, not completely, not enough to define it fully, but enough to confirm what he already suspected. This wasn't random. Someone very smart had built it that way. He realized how long he'd been there that day, so he shut the system down slower than usual. Not because he wanted to, he wasn't done. But for now, he had to stop. He wasn't going to step away from it. He was pausing it, and that meant he would come back for it. He didn't go straight home. He rarely did anymore. Not when something stayed in his head the way this did. Not when the feeling of it hadn't settled into something he couldn't put aside. The streets were quieter by the time he left. The kind of quiet that came from routine more than absence. People were where they were supposed to be. Lights were on. Everything in its place the way it usually made sense to him. Tonight it didn't. Tonight it all felt a little too structured, a little too predictable. like the surface of something that worked because no one questioned it too closely. The shop was still lit when he pulled up. That wasn't unusual. DJ kept odd hours sometimes, especially when there was work to finish or something that needed to be done right instead of fast. Sam stepped inside, the bell above the door cutting through the quiet in a way that always felt the same. Familiar, grounding. It was one of the few places that didn't change. Not really. Not in the ways that mattered. DJ was moving through the space, shutting things down one section at a time. The rhythm of it steady, practiced. Exactly like he had done forever, that it didn't require thought anymore. He looked up when Sam came in. Not surprised, just aware. "You're making a habit of this," DJ said, his tone light but his eyes staying on him a fraction longer than usual. Sam let the door close behind him. "Better than going home and staring at a wall." DJ gave a small smirk. "That's debatable." Sam leaned against the counter, resting his weight there without thinking about it. Quieter than usual, like he was deciding how much of what he was carrying he was going to put into words. DJ noticed that. He always did. "What is it?" DJ asked. Sam exhaled slowly, not dramatic, just steady. "There's something at work I'm not supposed to be looking at." DJ didn't react right away. "What kind of something?" "A case. Or not even a case," Sam said, adjusting slightly as he searched for the right way to describe it. "More like something they don't want touched." "That usually means it's important." "That's what I was thinking." DJ watched him for a moment. "And you're touching it anyway?" "I'm looking at it." There was a difference to Sam. Whether it mattered or not wasn't clear. "What is it?" DJ asked again, this time not letting it pass. Sam paused, then said it. "The Pirate King." DJ didn't move. Not right away. It was subtle. Most people would have missed it. Sam didn't. "You ever heard of it?" he asked. DJ hesitated, then shook his head. "No," DJ said quickly. "No." Sam just sighed and said, "It's weird," keeping his tone neutral. "Nobody wants to touch it. Nobody wants to talk about it. But it's everywhere." DJ leaned forward slightly, folding his arms, not defensive, just settled. "And you think you are the one who's gonna figure it out?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Sam let out a small breath, more from the weight of it than anything else. "It just doesn't make sense." "Some things aren't meant to," DJ said. "That's the problem." DJ studied him for a moment, longer this time, like he was weighing something that didn't have an easy answer. "Maybe they're being cautious," he said finally, "staying out of it." "Why would they do that?" "Because, son, sometimes the people who go looking for things like that end up in trouble." The way he said it mattered. It wasn't casual. Sam tilted his head slightly. "That sounds specific." "It's not," DJ said, not missing a beat. "It's common sense." Sam held his gaze for a second longer, then nodded like he accepted that, even though he didn't fully. "Yeah, maybe." The silence settled between them for a moment, not uncomfortable, but not empty either. It carried something unspoken that neither of them pushed into words. Then Sam pushed off the counter after a few seconds. "I should go." DJ nodded. "Get some sleep." "Yeah, I'll try." "Good luck." Sam turned toward the door, then paused, something catching him just enough to stop. "Hey!" DJ looked up. "I'm not going to get into trouble," Sam said. "I'm just looking." DJ held his gaze for a moment longer than he needed to. Something unreadable sitting just under the surface. "Yes," he said, "you are." Sam didn't question it. He stepped out into the night, the door closing behind him, the sound of it settling into something quiet like everything else. DJ didn't move right away. He stood there for a moment, looking at the door even after Sam was gone. His expression shifted slightly once he was alone. Later that night, a figure unlocked and opened the door in the corner. Far down past the long stairwell, the world didn't slow down. It never did. Rows of systems hummed steadily, lights blinking in controlled rhythm and screens producing activity across networks that didn't sleep. People moved with purpose. Conversations low, focused, efficient. No wasted motion. No unnecessary noise. Everything had a place, and everything stayed in it. This digital underground torrent operation ran 24 hours a day like it always did. The figure walked up and down a couple rows. Then, Dean Jensen looked around and took a seat in a big, complicated workstation. He hesitated, moved the mouse around, and the monitor woke up, requesting access. He pressed his thumb against the pad. The screen paused, then flashed like it was accessing something. Then a pop-up showed requiring him to enter his username. He looked up subconsciously, making sure the door was closed and locked. After checking that, he slowly went back to the keyboard and typed, "The Pirate King." Access was immediate. The system responded without hesitation, without delay, recognizing him in a way that made everything else in the room feel secondary. He didn't move right away after logging in. He sat there for a moment longer than usual, his eyes fixed on the screen. He didn't focus on any single piece of information. It was the whole of it, the network, the activity, the constant motion that never stopped, that never slowed and existed whether anyone was looking at it or not. Then he turned slightly, his voice calm, controlled. "Get me a list." One of the operators looked up. "Of what?" "Anyone high-ranking in law enforcement who's digging where they shouldn't." There was no hesitation in his tone, no uncertainty, just direction. "Flag them," he said, quietly. The operator nodded. "What do you want done?" DJ didn't answer immediately. He looked at the operator for a second, then back at the screen, like he was measuring something that didn't need to be said out loud. "Make it uncomfortable," he said finally. He paused, enough that they stopped. The operator nodded again and turned back to the system, fingers already moving, the request folding into larger operation without friction, without disruption, like it always had been there waiting to be executed. Around them, the underground kept moving, seamless, controlled, invisible. DJ stood there for a moment longer, his eyes lifting slightly, not to anything in the room, but above it, toward the world, toward the life he had just stepped out of, toward the son who didn't know what he was getting into. He didn't realize the implications. Not yet. Coming next week, Episode 6, Pressure.